Here's the English translation. It keeps the same energetic, factual tone and avoids graphic detail. Because your text is very long, I'm delivering a substantial first portion now, about 1,500 words. If you'd like, I can continue with the next block in the same style. A habit outruns thought. You automatically wipe sweat from your cheek with your palm. In everyday life, that is nothing. Here, in an empty city where children have been evacuated and the school doors are shut, it is a risk without dramatic music. Dust is not just dust. Water is not just water, and every gesture turns into a procedure. Why does even a simple movement require permission, sequence, control? Why do 24 hours in protective gear end up harsher than any romantic ideas about heroism? Not because it is terrifying, but because it is long, hot, monotonous, and allows no mistakes? By the end of this story, you will see 3 systemic reasons a newcomer would not last a day. How a regime of procedures replaces familiar freedom, how cumulative load erases attention, and how disciplined communications are not a bureaucratic whim, but the only way your personal determination does not break everyone else's safety. And maybe you will notice something you often underestimate at home: the reliability of infrastructure and the predictability of rules, the quiet background that makes modern life feel natural and automatic. We are in the northern part of a Ukrainian region, spring of 1986. The Gregorian calendar is familiar, but the sense of time is not. The city has had a day sliced away from the bustle of normality. Here, streets have become corridors, balconies, sealed windows, asphalt, a surface where the reflection in a puddle matters less than what is in that puddle beyond water. Our protagonist is a conscript soldier, a chemical reconnaissance specialist from the troops of radiological, chemical, and biological defense. He has at his disposal a respirator, a protective suit with a liner, a dosimeter, chemical indicators, sprayers with solutions for treating vehicles and sites, and a logbook in which any result matters more than emotions. The rules are simple and strict: a route by the contamination map, food only after inspection, water only where clean is marked, and even rest is not a right, but a stage. Sounds like you are ready to hear about heroism? In reality, you will hear about routine, because it is routine that holds the world in place and keeps the invisible from entering the clean zone. You want to drink. Reflex sends your hand to the canteen. Stop. Without a control measurement, any water is a lottery. In these days, the very word allowed does not begin with a commander's nod, but with 2 sequential operations. First, inspection. Second, confirmation. Boiling is our familiar way to reduce biological risks. Here, other agents set the rules of the game, and so, before any sip, there is an instrument, and before the instrument, someone who records the readings. Food does not live an independent life either. Canned goods arrive from a depot. Batch by batch they differ. Each is checked. Someone in the squad absent-mindedly wipes sweat from his forehead and gets a remark, not for sloppiness, but for breaking the seal of his mask. Eating becomes a procedure. Slit the package, treat your hands, remove the mask on command, put it back on. Even who sits where on the bench in the clean corner is not random. Repetition makes correct movements easier. You can hear your own hunger, and you wait until the section leader quietly says, "Masks off." Personal speed at that moment is not equal to collective safety, and this rule breaks pride faster than it breaks the body. Where you live and how you stay warm follows the same logic. The tent stands not where the view is pretty or the ground is smooth, but where instruments showed a minimum. The captain stares not at the horizon or the romance of a campfire, but at a map covered with marks. Spring nights seem like simple coolness. In a liner and cape, heat hits you by day, and the night pays it back with sweat in damp cloth. Clothes do not dry beside a flame like on a hike, but where a superior designates, because a wet fabric collects what you cannot see. Sleeping mat, pot, stove are not about comfort, but about rooting objects. Where to store them so you do not carry dirty into clean, who is responsible so duty never becomes anonymous. You get used to the idea that a trifle is not a trifle, but a knot in a chain. The liner you want to hang closer to heat by protocol hangs where air circulation is lower. The mug you want to keep by the entrance is stored deeper inside. Small inconvenience is the price for a probability you cannot see. If coziness once organized things, now safety does. A normal shift sounds familiar. Show up, do the job, go home. Here a shift is a planned route with sampling points and rechecks. A sequence where the important thing is not likes or we made it, but the absence of failures. Morning does not begin with we're all set, let's go, but with a briefing, this sector, these points, these signals. Emergency replacement goes this way, report to this station. Then you set out. Load-bearing surfaces, curbs and ditches are your enemies, because what floats in air settles where terrain gathers the tiniest weight. They wash vehicle wheels not to look nice, but because otherwise those circles will carry what must not enter evacuation corridors or the clean camp. In a protective suit movement is slower, breathing heavier, vision narrower. Fast people become precise, or they break the sequence. The day's rhythm, work, decontaminate, report, new task, ticks like a metronome, no panic and no theatrics. The commander unfolds the map, traces a perimeter with a pencil, assigns a lead for comms, a lead for solution inventory, a lead for the measurement log. The words are short, clear, without frills. Beauty today is an empty, incidents observed line. By dawn you have hammered in the habit of tracking the route with eyes and instruments. After dawn you understand. This belongs not to your will, but to your awareness of limitations, and the next step is health. A tablet of iodine is simple. It slips into conversations as if it could replace caution. Is that enough? No. Prophylaxis is one step in a larger routine. The essence remains with your mask, its valves, your seal, and the sweat-soaked liner that gathers what makes air an enemy. Heat stress arrives without fanfare. It drains strength, clouds vision, and turns a simple task into a slow wrestling match with your own body. Medical checks are not bureaucracy, but an early signal system. Blood pressure is written down, complaints noted, a decision made. Feeling unwell here is not shame or weakness. It is an engineering variable. If they pull you out for an hour, you come back without tremor. If you stay silent, you shake 3 others. The medic asks simple questions, looks at your skin, checks breathing, marks the log, returns you to duty, or sends you to shade. No heroic speeches, just sequence. You hesitate because you want to push through. In this system, honesty about your state is part of mutual insurance. Will you pay with overheating or miss a task, which is right? There is no right, only a choice between 2 bad outcomes. So you lean on rules. Rotation is not for the weak, it is for the sane. If someone admits, "My head is swimming," thanks are paid not in words but in action. His load is shifted, roles are rearranged, a gap is closed by another link. Here fatigue is a fact, not a bargaining chip, and acknowledging the fact raises collective resilience. Peek at a simple temptation. I'll cut a corner, step out of the corridor, slip across the yard. What will stop you? An instrument or an order? Access in the zone means passes, cordons, routes. The short path is seductive, but such detours lead through pockets of concentration you do not know about. Discipline is not a cult of control. It is the recognition that the contamination map ages every minute, and any solo maneuver is not merely risky, it is system unpredictable. Who owns what is known in advance? The section leader, people and vehicles. You, your checklist, comms, the report, the depot, inventory, and most importantly, nobody plays the free artist. A single rule, do not leave the route, seems to make life easier. In practice, it plugs you into another kind of dependence. You are supported not by strength, but by a network, and that network has nodes of nature that do not obey orders. Weather. You might say rain should help. It washes dust away. After rain, it must be easier. Sometimes, yes. More often, water gathers the unseen into puddles and edges. Where you used to hop across the gray sheen, now you must walk around. Wind is not background, but an invisible blizzard. It redraws the map without asking you. Soil, curbs, roofs, ditches, these are not just objects, but places where the logic of tiny particles beats the logic of human routing. You live in weather, like in another order, only the signature is not human. Sunlight adds heat under the protective cape. Shade eases breathing, but shade is not clean everywhere. You make choices not by convenience, but by readings. A puddle at the edge of the square almost begs you to cut across, but almost has no vote. The instrument and the order do. Equipment. Vehicles arrive from the dirty side. For them, the job is over and immediately begins again. For those who decontaminate hulls, wheels, beds, door handles. Solutions are mixed by the book. Usage is logged in a notebook. Sprayer nozzles are cleaned, seals checked, empty cans go into marked containers. Dark wet patches appear on concrete, and then those spots are measured again to make sure the risk's tail will not trail farther. In everyday life, a clean truck is one that shines. Here, a clean truck is one where the meter is quiet. No aesthetics, just verification. And once more, the same sequence. Bend, press, sweep, wait, watch the scale, write it down, repeat. The mechanics of action turn a person into a sequence, and in that sequence there is calm. Where faster tempts you, correct wins without applause. Comms, short commands in the headset, short words over the wire, short lines on paper. Who you report to, when, in what phrasing. It is all defined before you. That lowers eloquence and raises precision. At point X, control complete, no readings. At point Y, excess detected. Repeat check in progress. No long verbal essays, no ornamental phrasing. Beauty here is the absence of extra verbs. If something is unclear, you do not hunt for someone to blame. You hunt for certainty. Confirm, repeat, copy. Even the way you speak changes. Exhale shorter, sentences shorter, pauses shorter, because under a mask, talking is labor. The urge to chat, complain, or quip loses to fatigue and purpose. Chatter does not save energy, silence does. People. Unknown faces under masks are not easy to tell apart. Individuality hides under identical hoods. So you learn each other by gait, tiny gestures, how someone places a foot or holds their hands. In everyday life, such details are trivia. Here they are, friend or friendlier, recognition. A tilt of the head means all good. A clipped Roger in the headset means heard. Raising a sprayer level with the eyes means leave a lane. Even friendship is functional. No long stories by a fire, no arguments about music. The important conversations are about the next work sector and where the air is cleaner. The paradox, functional friendship, is sturdier than offense. If someone is late, you do not scold, you replace. If someone is spent, you do not persuade, you catch them. In the evening, nobody recalls who helped whom. Help was not charity, it was a part of the mechanism. Schedule. Time is not smooth. It is sliced into short segments, each attached to a task. There are windows for meals, windows for decontamination, windows for reports, windows for briefings. Between the windows are corridors where there is no later and no just for now. You cannot later wipe your mask. Later, swap a filter. Later, write the numbers. Later here means never or too late. So you do things now. You speak briefly. You hold now, not in general, in your head. First hand treatment, then mask off, then food, then the reverse sequence. No improvisation for speed, only improvisation for safety when the weather flips in front of you or a vehicle arrives in a state you have not seen before. Then it is not a lone genius. It is a team. One proposes, another verifies, a third records, a fourth reports. This foursome lives not in the word brilliance, but in the word responsibility. Training. Yes, even here. Drills do not replace work. They are embedded in it. Signals are rehearsed, standards are retraced, movements are adjusted to real fatigue. Mask on, fast but calm. Valve check, automatic but mindful. Learning to breathe under fabric is a separate skill. Learning to keep quiet when you want to talk, also. Learning to listen when you would rather not, especially. It sounds like a checklist for an ideal soldier. But there are no ideal people here, only trained ones. Freedom lives in the outcome, not the method. If you want to be surprised at how human habit rewires itself once it understands why. Mistakes. There are few, not because people are special, but because the procedure is built to catch them early. A glove fits poorly? That is spotted before leaving. Mask fogging? That is solved before someone steps into the hot part of the route. Someone else's fatigue is visible from behind? Your partner shifts his pace to make you notice you are not alone. In everyday life, we love to say, "I'll manage alone." Here, alone is a risk. The system saves by leaning on mutual visibility and mutual acknowledgement of limits. In a movie, "I'll shoulder the load" plays heroic. Here it is inevitable. Otherwise, it does not work. Reports. Every number has context. Every reading has its place. The logbook is not a fat tome, but sheets where sequence matters more than prettiness. Handwriting edges toward print-like clarity. An error is not smudged out. It is crossed through and initialed. Transparency is not a metaphor. It allows any teammate to read and understand. There are no essays in the margins. One conclusion matters, cleared or not cleared. If not cleared, a period, and then action. Repeat treatment. No extra words because in this system, extra words are noise. Social limits. Can you call home and say you are fine? In the before world, that is a kind gesture. Here, extra information means extra rumor, and rumor means pressure at cordons and attempts to break into places ruled by other protocols. Communication is trimmed to official traffic. Who reports to whom? What exactly? At what moment? Which words are off limits to keep unverified stories from multiplying? Personal freedom seems trimmed to a stump. You want leave, to step outside the perimeter, a cup of hot tea, to see your civilian sneakers on civilian asphalt. But not now. Your day is broken into short rest windows, and each window is also a procedure, because clean hands and liner off are not just hygiene, but contact prevention. Psychology. Fear does not shout. It is rationalized and dissolved into sequence. People say you can get used to anything. True, but habit does not grow out of thin air. It is formed by repeated actions, and each action is explained. You know why you must not touch your face. You know why you must not sit on a curb. You know why you must not duck into a yard for a minute. Once you know why, it is easier to do how. This is not about prohibitions. It is about adulthood. Adulthood is understanding connections. Children ask why endlessly. Here, every adult knows why is the master question. Answers are never because I said so, but or else the consequences. Body. The simplest things are the hardest. Sweat runs down your back, soaks into the liner, cools on the wind, and returns as a chill. You learn to regulate your pace so you do not drive your pulse into corners. You learn to drink slowly, in small sips, because fast is forbidden and greedy is pointless. You learn to sit without brushing extra surfaces. You learn to lie down without kinking valves. You learn to peel off gloves without touching the outside, and then to don new ones without scrambling the order. Each you learn adds up to confidence, not moral, but motor. Hands do the right thing when the head is tired. Evening. Light does not vanish at once, but fatigue arrives before darkness. You walk to the clean area where food awaits. Before food, treatment. Before treatment, queue. The queue is quiet, without shoving, because everyone knows. An extra step, extra twist, extra chance of transfer. Someone cracks a quick joke to loosen the air. The joke is not about fear, it is about heat. Laughter is short, like a whistle. Then, silence again. The meal is simple, but after all the sequences, it is a return to a world where flavor exists. Flavor reminds you that you are alive. Even that is scheduled, because the joy of a spoonful of soup is not a reason to break the procedure. Night. It is hard to sleep not because you are scared, but because your head still burns. Sounds roll on when you close your eyes. Curt commands, fabric rasping, buckle clicks, soft footfalls. You roll to your side and catch yourself not brushing the edge of your bag. The habit of guarding boundaries does not sleep. Sleep comes anyway. It is short, fragmented, but enough. You wake not because you are rested, but because it is time. Your sense of will is peculiar. You obey not a person but time, and that is not humiliation, it is protection. You are held not by someone's whim, but by a shared rhythm. Morning repeats what yesterday taught. Repetition becomes a strange kind of support. When each action is familiar and explained, the anxiety never vanishes, but quiets. Yesterday was your first, today your second, tomorrow your third. Each time, fewer errors, so fewer chances for someone else's trouble through your hands. You notice you think less in I need and more in we need. That pronoun shift marks that you are not a guest in the system, you are a part of it. Save stories about strength of character for another scene. Here strength lives in yielding to rules. Now the answer to the opening question. Why do simple automatisms, rubbing your eyes, gulping without a thought, stepping off the line, saying too much, turn risky here? Because the world you stand in has been retuned to a procedure regime. Any action you do at home without thinking has a price and an order here. That regime is the first systemic reason. It can seem cold and clumsy, but without it, you will not last half a day. It is not about heroism. It is a conveyor of small decisions that sift out randomness. Water treatment, package checks, the mask-on, mask-off sequence, the route to the wash station, the order of shutting down a sprayer. These sound boring, and boredom is exactly what keeps chaos away. Brush off a redundant formality, and the system loses integrity. One corner cut, and the invisible rides into the clean zone. The second reason is cumulative load. The suit, the narrow field of view, heavy breathing, constant damp under the liner, fingers trembling when you must hold something small, ringing ears after a long day, a stiff neck from the enforced head angle, coordination fraying after repeated bends. None of this alone is insurmountable. Together, they eat attention. You are not exhausted like a marathoner. You are eroded by constant correction. Each step demands will, and willpower is not infinite. This is why rotations exist, called soft, only by those who have never stripped and reseated a mask dozens of times in a day. Without rotation, without the right to say, my head is swimming, without respect for someone else's, I am unwell, the group becomes a mechanism with cracks. Mistakes do not thunder in, they creep in as inattention from heat, as a loose strap you will fix later, and that later often disguises a risk being moved where it must not go. The third reason is disciplined communication. A city of people, posts, routes, and depots works like a network. There is no room for improvisation that fails to account for adjacent nodes. I am stepping away for a minute is the same as switching off the traffic light because nobody is around. Who reports to whom, when, in what format, naming what exactly. This is not violence against language and not paper pushing. It is how the system filters our kind impulse toward well-meant, destructive freelancing. You do not fail because you are bad or weak. You fail because your natural impulse to move fast and alone smashes coordination. A network holds on definitions. Call clean what is unverified, and in half an hour, two people believe it is clean. Skip a nuance, and in an hour, nuance becomes a problem. Words are tools, and here that is clearer than in peacetime chatter. What do we underestimate today? The reliability of the tap that gives water, the predictability of rules that frame where you may walk and what is safe to touch, the accessibility of medicine you can enter without a pass and be received not if possible, but as required. In ordinary life, this sounds like background, and against that background, it is easy to argue about how full your days are. Here, the background is stripped away, and you see that life without it is a long list of conventions invented not to dominate you, but to make the invisible manageable. We like to think freedom means doing as I wish. Here, freedom is doing as we must, because as we must is the only path back to as I wish, in a quiet room where you can drink without an instrument. You can turn on a tap, an unremarked privilege. In those spring weeks, it was possible only after a chain of actions and only in designated places. An ordinary gesture seems free. Take a swig, wipe your face. Here you pay with time, attention, and the group's shared discipline. Cold is not degrees Celsius, but minutes to rotation, because cold outside and heat under the suit argue over your pulse. Can you sleep when night means instructions and day means cues of measurements? Perhaps, if you can sleep on signal and rise to someone else's time. Can you keep your dignity when every small thing is defined from outside? Yes, if you grasp that outside is not someone, but something larger than a person and stronger than his will. It may seem there were no heroes in the familiar sense. There was a group of people doing their share of boring work without theatrics. That is exactly the answer to the hidden opening question. Why would a newcomer not last? Because a newcomer expects emotional compensation for effort, and there is none here. There is only calm certainty that things were done as they should be, and that on the next sector, someone else is doing the same calm work. That turns the world back into something manageable. That is the opposite of chaos. This is where fortitude stops being a nice word and becomes technology. It is built from procedures, rotations, reports, dull checks, short words, and a timely, I need to step out. Think about the phrase, I know better. At home it sounds proud. In those weeks it could mean, I will break the order to satisfy a momentary need. And in the best case, a superior stops you. In the worst, consequences show up far from where you stand. Consider the gesture, left side clear. At home, it is just emotion. Here it is responsibility for everyone behind you. Skim the idea. I will call. Tell them I am alive, so they stop worrying. Anywhere else that is kind. Here it is, another wave of alarm where people are already stretched. Restraint rewrites familiar ideas of kindness and care. Sometimes the kindest act is silence and doing it by the book. The ending is as quiet as the day. You remove your mask in a clean place, wipe your face, sip slowly from your own canteen where the water is not questionable, but cleared on all points. There are no fanfares, no weary director patting your shoulder. There is a check mark in a log that the task is complete. There is a plan for tomorrow, and there is a simple thought that needs no slogan. Rules do not exist to restrain a person, but to preserve him. There is not a drop of romance in that, only what you need to reach your own good morning. You will go home and once again rub your eyes without thinking, drink from a mug without instruments, and cut across a courtyard on the diagonal. It is easy to forget. Somewhere in another story, someone else will be putting on a mask by the manual and doing 5 boring steps instead of 1 quick shortcut. Not because he loves order, but because survival is built that way, where the invisible is stronger than habit. If one day you ask yourself, would I last? The honest answer is simple. You would, if you agreed to trade inner freedom for external order for just 24 hours. That is not about courage. It is about living not only for yourself. That is the feeling at the end of the day. Not fear, not elation, but respect for calm, predictable sequence, for the very procedures that look like fuss in peacetime. We rarely thank silence for existing. Here, silence is the result of work you cannot see, and that is why, in ordinary life, it is priceless. If you need one takeaway for the future, it comes without pathos. The more reliable your everyday little things, the less likely you will ever have to live a day where every movement is a procedure, every sip a decision, and every word a tool.